Welcome back to Paul.caunce on construction. Today we're going to be talking about the theme of women in construction. It's quite a important topic for the industry and one that's featuring all the time in social media posting at least, and is driving a lot of policy certainly in larger organizations. Today I'm going to be speaking to industry diversity expert Bernice Cowton, who's going to share with us her thoughts on the topic of women in construction. Let's see what she has to say. Okay, Bernice, thanks for agreeing to be interviewed today.
Sure.
I've known you for over 10 years, but for the benefit of people watching this video, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so other than dabbling in a bit of PQSing during my kind of university placements, I've been a QS, initially quite a lot on building contracts. Started in London, central London, and then moved on to kind of Greater London, southern counties, working in those areas. Probably early 2000s, I moved back north, as you could probably tell from my accent. I've got northern roots. By this point, I was a senior QS, which I was for a number of years, actually. I kind of stayed at that level for quite a long time. I think when I met you, Paul, I was a kind of project, which was like a contracts level surveyor. And that was just before I was promoted to a commercial manager in 2007. Since then, I've worked as a senior commercial manager, a JV commercial director, head of commercial, which is what I am now. I think there's kind of a lot of stuff in the industry in terms of job titles. Frequently, there have been countless directors in businesses who, for me, aren't a director in the true sense, but that's a whole different topic. And I guess over the last 22 years or so now, I've led commercial projects up to about £500 million across construction, major infrastructure, services, and consulting sectors. I picked up a couple of nominations on the way for kind of women in engineering. So that's about me in terms of my history in the industry.
I didn't know about your nominations for engineering, so that's had I known, I would have probably made more out of that. So over that career then, would you say there are more women in construction now than when you started, or not?
I would say yes, because in my early years, not only would I be the only female on a project, I'd be the only female professional, I would say, add to that, in the company. Traditionally all the other females were in really kind of administrative roles, if that kind of makes sense. They might be in HR, they might be in the PAs or whatever it may be, but yeah, certainly I do think there are. I think at the moment, I'm working in a consulting sector which has a significantly better proportion, but I do think it varies greatly with sector. So up until March last year, I was involved with consulting and with rail. And in rail, the proportions would be a lot less compared to the consulting. And interestingly, I've been looking at where we take the commercial team of where I currently am, and looking at blends. And that's, it's much wider than just gender, but gender's a big part of it. And I have been looking at, I suppose, within the sector, how we as a business compare to sector, how we compare to population, because I do think there are elements of gender equality, and I think we have to be reflectant upon the market that we do work in, because you can't go overnight from, a very low percentage. I think if you look at our ICS population, they are circa 15% female. Right. CICES are around the 10-11%. Construction Industry Council, again, around the 15%. Yep. We're not going to be able to move within a very short space of time between a 15% and a 51% of the UK population, right? Because that's a big jump And like any change or progression, it is progressive, isn't it? However, I still think, proportionately, that's significantly low.
So when we think of change and progression, I'm thinking about the 2016 Farmer Review of the construction industry labour model, and the need for more digital skills, moving toward modern methods. Of course, as an industry, we've got a significant skills shortage in all aspects of the industry, professional and trade.
Mm.
How do you see women being able to um, supplement the workforce and pretty much assure the future of the construction industry?
Um, See, I'd probably look at it a different way, a little bit, because I'm not sure it needs to be only one of the genders
Right.
that is the source of this change, because it's initiative and it's a joint effort. It's like any collaboration that is going to be successful. It needs to have buy-in from both or multiple sides to be able to really influence and make that change. So
Right.
I don't think it is, how females can make that change, but equally, I don't feel it's just how men can make that change. It needs to be both, and
Mm.
it's about. I think it starts as well. It starts with culture, and the cultural artifacts of an organization, and I think, by cultural artifacts, I mean the myths and sagas about
Yeah.
success, the heroes and heroines, the language that we use and the metaphors, physical attributes and of the space and the interior, all that kind of stuff. And I think that is really important because whilst ever the culture of an industry supports the stories about the heroes who work the long hours, and the myths about the need for management roles have to be full time, they have to be until 2020 primarily in an office,
Yeah.
that is always going to get in the way of the progress. And now I think in order to change that, that's about approach, it's about policy, and that is male and females can do that. Um, and I suppose reflecting on the last 12 months, I think the COVID scenario has been hugely detrimental to many professional females who have ultimately, held the burden of the household, the childcare responsibilities, as is typically the case. And it isn't always the case, and there'll be some, males in a similar situation, but that happens, But so for me, how many times I hear a male make the comment about I'm babysitting, and I suppose it's a bugbear because I kind of go, you're not babysitting, you're being a parent.
Right.
Which it is true. And then many males refer to looking after their own children as babysitting. Anyway, so putting that to one side, I also think the last 12 months have been hugely transformational because I think there has been it's forced that realization that, remote working, flexible hours actually do work.
Yeah.
It's not about blood, sweat, and tears. And again, this comes back to the artifacts, and I particularly see it in, or we used to see it more, less so now, in job descriptions, job adverts, and in recent, and I'm talking the last 3 years, I've had the conversations where we've had a management role, and the argument has been that whilst there's a really strong individual female candidate in the business, she only works 4 days a week. So she couldn't possibly do that role because it had to be 5 days a week. And I've had some really challenging conversations because really, does it need to be 5 days a week? Because actually, if that's the right person for the job, then we can make that work. And I think the last 12 months has really accelerated that thought, which I think is brilliant. Because coming back to the shortage in the industry, there's a massive untapped resource from a quantum point of view,
Right.
but also from this kind of the skills, the approach, the language, the thinking, the different kind of thinking that different genders and different cultures can provide in an industry, which just kind of it promotes more change and lateral thinking, and I think it gives a better a better product. It's probably the best use of the word, but the statistics are undebatable in terms of the benefits of diverse cultures. Really,
Many
so I
large,
went on a little bit there.
sorry, I'm just talking over you. Sorry. Yeah, many large and more sophisticated organisations are tending to address that, but of course, the construction industry in the UK is 99.5% SMEs, which therefore are perhaps by necessity less sophisticated in their thinking. And it's often down to a key individual in terms of leadership. And you were talking about leadership, well, rather talking about culture, which clearly is developed by leadership and flows down through organizations from those leaders. So aside from the unique challenges that 2020 presented to all organizations, what other barriers are there to more women coming into the construction industry and seeing it as a rewarding career choice over other careers?
And I suppose if I talk just from personal experience, we've moved a long way. When I first started on site, we were still in an area where there'd be, calendars on walls. However, I think we've moved a long way in some respects in terms of that overt gender. I was going to say gender bias is probably not the right word, but gender statements doesn't exist. However, I also think it's become more subtle. I think in terms of some of the issues and barriers that we find, it's just become more backhand and under the radar. And again, I know this from personal experience.
The overt, objectification is there to be seen,
Yes.
and if it's under the surface, it's almost unchecked.
Deniable.
Yeah, undeniable. Yeah.
And I think I think ultimately, personally, the barriers I've found is that when I've moved, and say I've moved, not necessarily business, but even within the same organisation. So I have a reputation within an organisation, seemingly a reasonable one, and moved to a different project. It's almost, it becomes that if you're female, and again, it's personal experience, it's quite possibly not like this all the time, it's assumed you can't do the job, or you need to prove that you can do the job. Whereas if you are male, and we talked before, Paul, you're a very tall man. If you're a tall man, not just a man, if you've got grey hair, even if you're only 30, but you've got grey hair, with that comes the assumption that you can do the job. And
right.
Actually, as a female, it's quite often assumed that you can't do the job. And I found that I've moved within a business from one framework to another. And I felt that I've had to prove myself. I've had to fight, but I don't mean that in an aggressive way, just to have your voice heard. And, I'm aware of other females, and maybe it's because I've got a deeper voice than many females, but who can sit in meetings and then they'll express an idea, and then 5 minutes later, one of the male colleagues will express the same idea, and I'll be, oh, great idea, and there's many things like that for females in the industry become deeply frustrating, become very tiring. And so when you're trying to progress your own career, it becomes quite exhausting, because it feels like you're having to go through the same steps that you had to do in early career. Even though you're coming into your later career, you have to keep making the same steps and keep moving through the same loopholes. And that, I've contemplated in the past, should I just get out of this? Because really, I'm tired. I'm tired. I know I can offer a great service, but I'm tired of having to do this. I'm tired of having to fight just to be able to do my job well. And I think in terms of, there are significant barriers still to promotion and to senior management because of networks and how we network, and stereotypically males may be slightly better at networking than females, and that could again be tied to again gender stereotypes of who's looking after home. I think that that does, and also in terms of from a female, you don't. And again, personal, I don't put myself out there, and I know I should, and everything I read tells me I need to more, but I don't put myself out there saying I'm this, I'm great, I'm wonderful. It just doesn't come natural to me. And again, I think it can come natural more to people or more to men than can females. But again, that's not, there are always exceptions to that. It's not a rule.
I wonder if that's how males overcome other males by more successful networking within their own organization to be selected among their peers.
It's to get you in the room, isn't it? And I think that's how the network works. The network works to get you in the room, because once you're in the room, then you can sell yourself. But ultimately, it's getting you into the room. That's how it works, isn't it?
Let's talk about that room then. I've been told before that I'm an effective negotiator, and you've already said, I can fill a doorway, right? So
Yes, that's true.
if someone's never met me before and we're going to meet and we're going to negotiate, I have used that to my advantage, that kind of physical presence. I'm getting on a bit now, so most of the people my age are grey haired, and they you're right. We collectively use that to our advantage. So, what's your counter to that? I'm a successful negotiator. I'm a large man. How would you cope with that situation, being a female? How are you able to compete in that environment?
And it's interesting you say that, and I do think, and again, the statistical evidence about physical size across industries actually being an influencing factor in terms of success, interestingly. But I suppose, arguably, Paul, I'm, people can't see, but I'm 5'2". I'm probably circa half your body mass.
I would probably
And
guess.
I mean, we met 14 years ago across the table on a construction contract. We were opposing sides,
Yeah.
arguably. As a female, how would you say that I compared to, I guess, the many males that you have prior to that and since that had experience of?
I'd like to think that I've always been reasonably fair in terms of gender stereotypes, but I can give you a very brief account of how that went, and that was basically that you took me to the cleaners before order, and yeah, I was impressed, and I don't know whether being impressed was as a result of my own predispositions and assumptions. I probably didn't think about it as much at that time as to why I was just taken to the cleaners by someone who happened to be female. But yeah, you were quite effective.
And so I guess that answers the question, doesn't it? But I kind of feel that, come back, I've mentioned it earlier, language as well, isn't it? It's in a man's world. And I kind of think, okay, 2021, right? Let's start by the subtleties of changing that. Do we need to say it's a man's world anymore? It's not. It's the technological advances that we're having in the industry means that it's less grunt work, physical work, which typically would be a male because they are physically stronger. We're getting so far away from that, and in the world that I work in at the moment, so much is automated, or from the point of view the work we're doing with drones on surveying, which is meaning no boots on ground.
Yeah.
The need for physical strength, I think, is significantly diminishing. So therefore, we can start moving away from this classification that it's a man's world. And I think again, that's it's one of the biggest change makers is subtleties in terms like that. And so from a female point of view, I think the environment's changing, so we need to use that. I think we've learned a lot of lessons in the last 12 months. And I think as a female, I mean, I get it. I get your size as you walk in the room as a small person. You kind of go, ooh. But, I think I was confident in what I was doing. And at that point, I did my job at the time, successfully, as it seems.
So we've gone across a couple of aspects. There is still some gender stereotyping. There are some, particularly males, who think of women as not being able to do the role to however they're measuring success. But as you said, we are getting more women in the industry. The change in the industry means that there is less reliance on physical strength, for example, and hopefully as people are communicating more effectively, aspects of physical size will have less to play. What would you say to a woman, maybe an early career or maybe even a mid-career person who is considering a career change? What advice would you have for women in terms of the construction industry and being able to take advantage of career opportunities?
Do you know, I mean, what I would say is be yourself and be authentic. Don't feel that you have to play to fit in. I've been there and I've very much done that. And it makes for a very split life. And if you're living two lives, as in a you and a work you, it isn't sustainable. And you just become unhappy with the way that you're living. So I would say be you, and then it is brave to do that because naturally you will be different to a lot of your colleagues. But it's about calling out behaviour and language again, as I mentioned. But I very much believe, and I will do that regularly, but I'll do it in a very educational way. I'm not for, don't say it like this, that's wrong. That's not helpful. Nobody wants to be talked to like that. It's very, do it in the educational way, saying, well, actually, perhaps could we term it this way, or can we just, neutralize the language a little bit? However you approach it, we've got to do it in a positive way. We've got to do it looking for how we can, rather than criticizing what something is, look for how we offer a positive alternative and solution. And like I say, it's quite a brave world and place to be in because you feel that you can be shot down quite easily. But if we don't start doing that, and females in the business specifically coming in to do it, then we're not going to change, and the industry is not going to change, and we will continue to kind of fall behind other markets. I mean, what, in the top 100 of the FTSE is a 4 big construction companies? It's
Right.
It's minor considering the turnover of the industry. We should be having a much higher percentage there, but we don't, and we have to look at the reasons why we don't. And this is one of the reasons, isn't it? It's we stifle ourselves, or we stifle progression by sticking to our stereotypes, by sticking to our this is how we've always done it kind of mentality. So for females coming in, I'd say it's not going to be easy. So don't think it's going to be plain sailing, unfortunately. But then arguably any career is not going to be easy. But yeah, really be authentic and really just be positive in the challenge.
Well, if we don't get new agents of change coming in with different perspectives, then we will collectively continue in that vein of always doing what we always did and getting what we always got, which is not ideal.
Same results. If you keep doing it the same way, you get the same results there, and it's
Okay, well, appreciate that. Thank you for sharing your expertise in this area.
Well, I have personal experience. I'm not sure expertise, but I have personal experience, Jamie.
I know that you've had a lot of experience in diversity in large organizations. So I appreciate that insight. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
At that point, we'll end the interview.
Okay, nice to talk to you, Paul.
And you. Thanks, Bernice. So I hope you enjoyed that short discussion with Bernice on women in construction. If you like the video, please hit that like button. Perhaps leave a comment if you have an opinion on this subject. And of course, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. If you hit the bell notification, YouTube will notify you when I publish a new video, perhaps with a future interviewee on a different subject. And once again, all that's left is to thank you for watching Paul.caunce on construction.